That's the beauty of this. We can beat the shit out of Johnny Depp, so it doesn't matter. It's a not issue. He starts acting weird, we're just
I
like,
guess I don't
bam,
know.
smack him around. The fuck you think you are, Johnny Depp?
I suppose you probably could. I try to sell you some, I don't know, green technology. He's a big green guy, isn't he?
I don't know. He's from my neighborhood in
He's
Florida.
left. He's far. He's pretty. I think he's pretty left.
I would imagine
really?
he's in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Like, one of them isn't fucking left.
Well, I know.
But once again, I could still whoop his ass, and that's the important part. I whooped Johnny Depp's ass.
Yeah, I hear you.
All right, I'm about to do my viewing plorte here. I don't know much, but I know I'm a walrus, and that may be all I need to know. All right. I hate when it does this stuff. I can't have a watch party here, folks. Is that what you're telling me?
What'd it do?
Maybe it's just on the phones. We got a fun episode coming up next week, I think.
Yeah. So who is this girl?
Just a person.
A person. She's a person.
Yeah, you know, just a person.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
Why is my shit so dark, man? I'm like in super shadow, man. Oh well. Y'all are gonna have to deal with it.
All right.
My dark face.
Sorry, I think I get the watch party turned up now.
Yeah. Huzzah.
All right. So, I guess, welcome everyone to Free Markets Green Earth episode 42. What should milk cost?
The effort to squeeze a nutter.
That's what you think it costs? Yeah, so in an effort, I actually went and looked stuff up to talk in this episode. Because I'm sure we've all seen it's now made it to the New York Times. So, oh boy, they're talking about all the milk that's getting dumped. New York Times article also got into the produce that's being thrown out. Because when you shut down all of the restaurants in the country, you throw off how much of things are needed.
It's a huge demand.
Yes, it is. And especially with milk, like I don't think people have any frame of reference on specifically that industry, like how insanely regulated it is, and more importantly, how long it has been regulated, which I knew had been regulated forever, but I wasn't entirely aware of like how much. Like, and we're not talking like safety regulations. Don't go thinking that, because that would make sense. No, milk is actually regulated in the price and commodities markets in ways that are frankly bonkers and screw over everyone.
Everyone.
But so when I was researching this, one of the things that I found was this paper by some Cornell students. It looks like from like probably around 1995, based on the years that they were citing in it.
Yeah, I think it's dated. It looks like it got printed February of 95.
That may well be.
I think.
But even just going till that point, I didn't even. It's pretty intense.
Yeah.
All the stuff that was going on with milk. So, I mean, am I the only person who's seen this, or it's pretty safe to say you're aware of what's going on, Ben?
With milk, with how much the government loves milk. Yeah, it's been, and this thing, like I knew stuff was going on. I didn't realize that it went all the way back to like the depression and the
Oh
fallout of
no,
that,
no,
and
no.
like,
You're
you
not
know,
even
it's
going. You're
like,
not even going for enough back.
well, in
I'm
terms of like government, New Deal crap and agencies and
because I'm looking at 1922 as the first like shit that they're starting. So
yeah,
we're
yeah,
we're going all the way back then. And you know what they were doing right there? Basically, milk producers decided, hey, we think maybe the milk distributors are trying to fuck us, and so they got together and they just actually no take it back. That was like 1913 that happened. 1922 just said they were allowed to do it. Basically, they got together, started colluding, formed a little cabal, and said, "All right, well now we're gonna fix prices." And the Capper-Volstead Act of 1922 legally made it okay for them to do that. Um, Prior to that, basically all you had were some like sanitation requirements for some types of milk.
right.
Like I think if you're selling it as liquid to be drank and not for production, it has to have higher sanitation requirements, which would make sense. Um, the problem is that now they're going to have to try and start selling milk for various uses. And everything that happens after this point is an attempt to fix prices in one way or another.
It's what you see always happens, right? Like there might be an issue, government gets involved, and then they're trying to fix whatever they did for the next, eternity.
Well, one of the big things that I know that we'll harp on, and I hate, I don't want to sound callous to people that have been in this industry perhaps for generations. In my world, I think you should be able to be in that place for generations based on your ability to produce well.
Yeah.
The problem is that's not exactly how that works all the time. Um, like the whole idea behind what they were trying to do in the first place was fix prices. They wanted to collude so that they could keep the prices up so they didn't feel like they were getting screwed over. The problem is when you start doing things like that, you start messing with comparative advantage, which is some places are going to produce milk better, some places are going to produce it cheaper, and those that happen to use their intelligence or by luck manage to be in a place that produces it better and cheaper, like they win, and they should win because ultimately it makes it better for the consumer.
Yeah.
And now this doesn't seem like a lot, but you're like, okay, well, we can take care of dairy farmers. That's something we can do. The problem is, while we're trying to take care of dairy farmers, the ways that we choose to do that we're now in a position where we're throwing shit out because our markets are not reflexive. And also, I think that our farmers don't make as much money as they should because there's too many other hands in the pot, and we just don't, frankly, know what the good should cost. Like it's not sold
Yeah.
as a commodity because of it.
Yeah, I think when it boils down, there's no telling how much the market actually demands. There's no telling what a fair price actually is. Like it has been so manipulated and distorted that nobody knows. Nobody knows. And I mean that one article.
And when it matters when it's us dumping milk, we're screwing over animals. We're just throwing milk away as waste.
Yeah,
That's why it matters to me.
it's a really interesting thing to think about when you try to get into that. Why at what point does it make sense to throw away food? And what is that? Why is that? Why does that actually happen? That it's cheaper to throw it away to actually milk the cow and throw it away than it is to um, offload it somehow somewhere. Um, but I think we'll get there. I don't know.
Um,
I
so
don't want to jump the gun too early.
yeah, I wanted to kind of start by kind of going through a little bit of a history on this, and I'm not going to get too deep into it because I'm not an expert. I read a paper that kind of basically laid out the different interferences in the milk market. Okay. And yes, Bryce Jackson, that is actually exactly what we're about to get into. So, in 1933, you have the Agricultural Adjustment Act. It's the first time that like the government starts getting involved in price controls for milk. In 1935, it's amended to include something called the Federal Milk Market Orders. Now, this is central planning of how much of what different types of milk can be made and how much it costs.
I thought we lived in a capitalist society.
Free markets, right?
Yeah.
So, also within this, like inclusion in this was basically you couldn't get into this situation for these orders for milk unless I think it was like 75% of the people in there wanted you to be in there and said you were allowed to be. So just straight up cartelization, limiting the amount of people that can get into the market. But it's the classic move for when you want to make things cost more, which is what they're trying to do. The other thing that it did was it actually provided clauses for the government to buy surplus.
Right.
Now, back then, they're looking at like that would have been like 1% of the market for that to do that. But, when that's there, there's always going to be creep. There's always going to be people asking, you've got to help us, you got to help us, you got to help us. Right. So, 1937, you have the Agricultural Marketing Agreement Act. So, most of these are just updating the previous ones. And you'll see that it happens a lot. Basically, every couple of years, they just update.
I mean, that's how government works. You just update and add in extra little things on every time it gets reevaluated. None of it ever goes away.
That actually is pretty interesting there, Bryce Jackson. We have here in the watch party, he said Calvin Coolidge, who's a Vermont dairy farm boy, actually opposed and vetoed the first attempts at ag subsidies. So that's pretty interesting.
Curious.
We'll have to look into that. 1941, the government starts purchasing butter on the open market as a way to, help drive demand. And they also have the Stiegel Amendment to incentivize production. 1949.
Incentivize production.
Yes. Why do we want to incentivize production? Like, prices should rise to do that unless, oh, wait, you fucked them up royally. So, 1949, the Commodity Credit Corporation purchases dairy to this day, according to the article, and this was written in 95, okay? 1951, the Trade Agreement Extensions Act, which limits foreign dairy in markets in an effort, because their dairy is cheaper. So we'd have to pay, the prices would fall. Farmers wouldn't be able to make as much here at home. All right. 1973 is the next big one, which we have the Agriculture and Consumer Protection Act.
Always got to protect the consumer, man.
By blocking out cheaper alternatives. Okay. 1977, the Food and Agriculture Act. 1983, Dairy Production Stabilization Act. I can't help but laugh at just the idea of stabilization, because just for record, all of these are attempts to stabilize prices, because sometimes we, I guess as Americans, we're used to going out and finding what we want whenever we want it at all times, and the only way to do that is to make sure it's always overproduced, basically, because we don't want prices to rise either, because it's difficult for people to deal with. 1985, the Food Security Act comes into play, which brings the Dairy Termination Program and the Dairy Export Incentive Program. Lots of incentivizing here, huh?
Yeah, you got it. When you remove incentive by flatlining price, I guess you have to create incentive. I don't know. Why do they need to do it?
1990 is the last one that was written about in this article, and it's the Food, Agriculture, Conservation, and Trade Act. So The word that I heard in there an awful lot was incentivize. Apparently, sometimes farming isn't very lucrative. And while I feel bad for farmers that may be the case, maybe the land's messed up, maybe the market's just out. Maybe it's a seasonal market, and they've got to find a way to do something seasonally, utilize that land in other ways. I don't know, but the point is that just the government paying someone to do something when the times are low just fucks over us. Or if it's a matter of that it's a seasonal market and sometimes the price has to go up, maybe they can find a way to stabilize the price themselves by selling more.
I think when you
like buying fruit out of season,
when you flatline a price like that, right? When you support a price, when you create these incentives by purchasing milk from farmers and whatever, you create an incentive to get into that market, right? If I'm thinking like I'm in school, like maybe I want to go into farming industry and dairy cows are there, and guess what? The government's handing out money to go get in that field. Like I'm going to go do that. Like there's a line that you can't go bankrupt, right? Like you will get support, and that incentivizes a flood of people. Whereas if they weren't there incentivizing it, you might not have as many dairy farmers, as many fruit farmers, or whatever it is. And so, yeah, you might be able to make a better living if that was actually what you wanted to do, and you were good at it.
The thing that really frustrates me is that from 1922 to 1990, and I'm sure it's been updated in a bunch of acts since then, because God, especially with Trump, he loves his agricultural bailout.
This one article said that that the CCC there, whatever the hell it stood for, that didn't get much love on it after the 80s until Trump came and used it to I don't know, to in his trade war with China, right?
Well, I was gonna say
he started using it to give subsidies and stuff to the farming industry. So it was there, and it lied in wait until somebody decided we needed to use it again, and he did.
But so the thing that frustrates me is so that we're sitting over here, and that first date, 1922. Each one of these acts alters or updates some form of price control that had been there in the past. So from 1922 till today in 2020, we have not had a market rate for milk.
Yeah.
100 years, and we have no idea what milk would actually sell for without people deciding that price.
And you say milk, but you got to keep in mind like that's all encompassing. Like when you actually stop and think, what is milk, right? And you are, but like when you think about that, like what that affects and the reaches of that, it's amazing. Like think about any product you buy that comes in a can or pre-mixed or whatever, pre-made food. Check the ingredients. There's some sort of lactose in there. It no doubt comes from, the dairy industry. It's all over. It's so far reaching that.
Well, in the byproducts, there's so many different things you can do with it. Yeah. So you say you have a surplus. Well, then you powder it and you sell it to people that make protein powders. Yeah. There's a lot of different things that you can use dairy for, especially now. Like you get into the supplement market. Like I feel like almost every supplement has some form of like powdered whey in it from one of the processes that we go through. There's things that can be done with it. So we're stuck here. We're all holding the bag on this. You, me, everybody. We're sending money to farmers for there may be people that don't even drink dairy. Some people think it's crazy. Why do we drink cow's milk?
Yeah,
like that just seems ridiculous. You get a vegan tip.
Yeah, no. You think about all the people that are stuck on their nut milks that are having to pay for this, right? They pay for this. They pay for my $1.99 a gallon milk at the grocery store. You know?
Yeah, and they don't have a choice in that. Doesn't
Nope.
matter if they use it. And once again, we're left where we don't know what that's worth. And
I think that's the hardest part, right? Like when you actually stop and look at all these legislation that's gone on, at the end of the day, you have no clue. You have no idea what a gallon of milk actually costs. You know, what does it cost that cow to eat that grass, and for the farmer to milk that cow, and the chemicals to clean the udders and run the machines. All this, you have no idea because it's just so distorted, you know?
well, and it's not like it only affects itself. That's the thing that like
Mhm.
people don't understand. Prices, and this is, you know, like we'll get Austrian here for a second. Prices are so important, and
Yeah.
it's the price calculation problem is why central planning cannot work. It always fails. It always ends badly, and it's because there's this giant web of people making decisions every moment of every day to figure out what things should cost. And in their head, they don't think about it, but they're doing calculations, thinking, well, I could buy this or I could buy that for everything that they may purchase. And those things slide daily, hourly. Could be, you know, they saw a commercial that makes something a little bit more valuable in their head. You know, they could be close to starving, and it makes certain things more valuable to them. You know, you want that VCR until you ain't got money for food, and then that food becomes way more valuable. You can't find food, let me tell you. Like I said, right now in this market, like those first couple weeks,
Yeah.
looking for Clorox wipes,
Yeah.
I'd have paid fucking crazy money for Clorox wipes because I couldn't find them.
Yep. Yeah.
Which is the marginal utility effect on prices. The problem is, so when we look at something with a subsidized price, that now affects everything else that may have been weighed against that in the market.
Yeah.
You know, what else could people be having aside from milk? If milk was more expensive, what would they have? You know, if the prices weren't kept low artificially, what would happen if they weren't buying? If the government wasn't buying excess milk,
Yeah.
and then having to create government programs specifically to use that milk, like say the government cheese and powdered milk programs back in the 80s, which everyone, Velveeta cheese that you love so much is government cheese.
You know, yeah. Yeah. It has its place. It does have its place on a grilled cheese or in, you know, some noodles, but
No, dude, the
after that.
nachos.
Oh yeah,
You make the taco meat and then melt the Velveeta, throw in some salsa. You remember the old commercials? It works.
I do. I
There's
do.
no argument. Like that's one thing you can do good on that. Nacho cheese is not supposed to be good cheese. It's supposed to be crappy cheese.
To be honest, I don't think I've ever had Velveeta. I think maybe once or twice in my life, but it's always been like if I have that sort of cheese, it's always like the American cheese slices, like the pre-wrapped, you know.
Fuck that. I was poor as shit in the 80s, man. We had straight up government cheese and powdered milk. I know it.
I mean, you know, I think it's this. I mean, come on, it's American cheese. I mean, like, look at that branding. It's
Mm-hmm.
patriotic to eat your food, whatever it is. You know, sweep the ends of the cheese off into the melting pot and
Yeah.
make some nasty.
But that was a program designed like to the government sitting on warehouses. Like, what the hell do we do with this? Like, hey, let's
Yeah.
send poor people a bunch of cheese.
Well, but and that's what happens when you have like. So
What could that
what did
dairy
happen?
farm be
Like,
used for, though?
well, it was Jimmy Carter. Like what they say, he put in like $2 billion into the dairy industry, right? So like, there's all this money in there, and like I was saying, right, somebody wants to be a dairy farmer because all their dairy farmer friends are loaded, right? Because they're making good money off this stuff because the government's buying their excess product. You know, if you actually put that on the market where there was no, you know, endless subsidization to be had, you wouldn't
Well,
have that, you know.
well,
And
well,
so,
I got into a discussion with a friend the other day, um,
oh,
specifically about this, and And she was saying that she was her fourth generation dairy farmer. Her grandparents and the 4 generations back they'd done it,
Mhm.
and now they couldn't do it anymore because of the system. I guess
Right.
you can't make a living doing it anymore.
There's multiple things there, I think. But I'm curious, what
But my point was is that and I said to her, I'm like, I would like to know that the reason you did that for 4 generations is because you're good at it.
Mhm.
The fact of the matter is if you're not good at it, what the hell is the good to it? If you're gonna be cranking out an overpriced product that people don't want or aren't willing to pay for, what is the good of you doing that? And the fact is, we can't know that. We don't have that information because we've screwed with the industry so much that we just can't know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you can't, and you won't. And it's tough, man. It's tough. It's tough to see people that have had a something in their life for that long, right? Generations. But at the same time, you know, it is what it is. And
What
I,
is what are we using that land for if we're not using it for dairy farms? What could we be growing there?
well, and that's the thing. And I know people that have left the dairy industry to grow other types of things, right? They instead of having dairy cows, they've turned to beef cows. Instead of doing cows at all, they've turned to goats.
And what
There's
happens when we have fewer dairy farmers out there?
well, right, and that's like the whole point of it. When you
Prices rise.
flood the market with all these people, everybody's making it. You know, prices are going to go down. You limit the number of people. I mean, look at the medical field, right? You limit the number of doctors, and yeah, they can demand a higher price. You that's what happens. But
One of the things that I think like that I do this show is because I want people thinking about nature from an economic standpoint. We need to think of the fact that in Thomas Sowell, economics is the study of competing uses for resources, and all the resources that we use to create food or that we love to have as far as nature, those things can all be used in multiple ways, and we need to understand why we choose to use them in other ways, if for no other reason than to help incentivize people to change and utilize them in what we would see as being better ways. Prices help do that. They help accommodate that.
well, exactly right. Like I'm not going to go buy 100 acres and put up a bunch of cows if like I know that that's going to be hard living and I could do it better a different way. Or maybe I'm not going to buy that 100 acres and somebody else that's can afford the taxes on it and let it sit will do that. I mean, who knows, and that's the point of it all. I think you don't know, and trying to control it and plan for all of it doesn't work. And we've seen that
Well,
countless times.
now what we're dealing with right now is slightly different in that
It is and it's not.
the reason that we're dealing with milk being tossed out is because the government shut everything down. Like it said, entire industries of food production are no longer allowed to function.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure there's rules that all those people can't sell back to their, the distributors. They can't sell to people like other companies that are going to utilize that stuff. It's certainly
Yeah.
not a market easily, able to do that, facilitate it. So I'm sure we got stuff sitting in restaurants, rotting on the shelves.
And I think and because I don't know the logistics of like the laws and what it looks like to actually be in there. I know I saw one article. I think it was from out in LA, where a restaurant could make you a hamburger, but they can't actually sell you the groceries to make the hamburger, right? They can't sell you those individual pieces to take home and make the hamburger.
Well, and that was one of the things I was seeing in particular, like in New York.
Mhm.
Basically, like high end restaurants get all of the best produce in New York. All right. Now, all of that high end produce, like it's just sitting in distributors waiting to be sold,
Right.
and it can't be sold because the restaurants aren't there to purchase. So, what is keeping, you know, general consumers from being having access to all of that?
Yeah, and I think that's where there's yeah, and I think that's one of the big things, right? Is what is keeping us from getting at that, right? And they can give some of it to food banks and that sort of thing, but even then, like you think about how many articles have you seen where, you know, some people giving soup to the homeless in the park got their soup dumped out, got bleach dumped in their soup because, you know, you can't do this, you don't have a permit for this. Like if you didn't have those sort of regulations in the way, how much of this food could, you know, could the farmer just like put out and say, hey, come pick it up because it's going to rot in the field,
Yeah.
you know, like whatever it is. And I don't know. And maybe with the quarantine, what it is, you know, the tape to put on the floor and mark your 6 feet is too expensive. I don't know, but it's mind blowing to see the amount of food just being like tilled back into the soil. Um,
But then again, all that food being tilled back in the soil is going to at least add something useful to the soil.
and that I thought about that, right? Because some of these articles, you know, one of them had like farmers tilling their beans back in, and they're gonna replant and hope that when those beans are ripe, that everything's back on track, right?
Yeah.
Like all the food's there. And while on one hand they're tilling it back in and putting all those nutrients back in, you know, like we talked about last week, how do they get those things to grow, right? They fill the ground and the soil with all their, you know, fertilizers and pesticides. So now we're just, you know, double dosing it back up. And I guess there's some benefit because you're tilling it back in, but at the same time, I don't know. It it's a very curious thing. It's a interesting concept to look at. But I think again, it goes back to this idea that these farmers are subsidized, right? Like they're dumping out, you know, 5% of the milk that's produced because there's overproduction. Well, there's already overproduction to begin with, right? And why is that overproduction happening? Because the government's paid these farmers to do this stuff. If you didn't have that, you would have had a smaller supply to begin with, and maybe it would have been, you know, you would have been able to deal with it better. Um, you know, and who knows what those regulations look like that, like, you know, you're not allowed to sell milk in such and such container to such and such people at such and such
Well,
time of day
well,
or
one of
whatever.
the other things that it looks like they do in there is they highly regulate what the milk you produce is, and it's like a
Yeah.
buying scheme where basically all milk is paid for the same, despite what kind of milk it is or how the milk is. It was very confusing to me, but it's like, you know, shouldn't you be able to set your price based on the growing conditions? Like, and have a market based on what you grow versus what someone else grows.
Yeah, you should, right? But when you have a,
I feed my cows only berries,
I don't know, man. To me, it seems
or
like
I feed
a
my cows crunch berries.
happy cow. Um, but it's
Diabetes
almost
cow.
it's almost like a union or like a monopoly, right? It's one of those government induced monopolies that like there is a certain price set for your milk, and there's a certain, and to be fair, I doubt you could get much more for it sometimes, like just because of how many farmers there are. But it also that's, you know,
Well, and that's exactly it.
it
They
disincentivizes
need to
people.
stop doing that. They need to find another job. Like they need to allow that to happen.
Well, and that's it, right? Like you let that failure happen. You have
There
to,
are
and it
natural ways
sucks.
to raise and lower prices. We just choose government interference every time.
We do, because I don't know. I think people seem to think that, I don't know, when government does it, at least we were trying to help, right? Like, you know, when you just let sort of nature take its course, it's like, oh, you know, you're just throwing them to the wolves. How could you be so mean to let these poor people, you know, starve and not have a job? And well, you know, it's not my job to give you a job. You know, and if that so happens that your milk doesn't work out, maybe you try organic milk, maybe you whatever it is, like yeah.
I know that there's a pretty good market for non-pasteurized milk. It's pretty robust if you can find it.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly, right.
I think you got to be willing to go to jail for that, though, right?
Depends on your state, depends on I think as long as you have like an animal like in your car and you can say you're using as pet milk, I think you're okay. Most places. Could be wrong. But it's wild
Then
when
you
you
say that like someone who knows this market pretty well. Why don't we have
no.
Weisgarber on tonight for this though?
We should have. We should have. Go call him up right now. See what he's doing.
I thought about messaging him before we got together.
He could have. I'm sure he would have been down.
Maybe we'll do a part 2 sometime.
Yeah.
Next week we're gonna have a fun one, a fun episode. I'm pretty pumped on. So
Yeah. Guess always
yeah,
bring up the
zero waste.
So, and that's part of it too. I was thinking about this whole milk thing. How much it comes down to, like, when you think about the packaging and everything else, and I mean, I don't know what the regulations are on packaging, but I imagine like there's, I don't know. It's just the whole situation is a mess, and we're looking at the acts, we're looking at
And it's been 100 years of cartelization. Yes, it is. It is a mess.
and that's it,
100%.
right? Like, what underlying things are there that you're just not privy to, whether it's the cost or how you're supposed to do this, or the actual ins and outs of the dairy industry. It's I don't know.
Yeah. So I know that this hasn't been the most information heavy episode. It's more of a frustration episode. Me and Ben are trying to work through like what is just absolutely insane in our minds. But to me,
It,
those are some of the most fun episodes. Like just
it,
us being frustrated at the audacity of what is actually going on.
well, like you think about think about the fact that they are dumping milk, right? That like they're throwing vegetables away. You want to tell me that there isn't some organization or somebody out there that would say that would be willing to take that for a price, come to the farm, pick it up for a price, and you would recoup some of those losses.
We can't sell it for dog food.
Well, and so the one place was right there. They're have too many chickens, and so they're selling their chicken eggs as dog food, and there's some of that there. But I guarantee, if like, there's got to be like Gret Glyer and like DonorSee or some like GoFundMe type thing, or there could be an organization that does that. But I guarantee you that farmer would not be allowed to do that. I can almost guarantee you that if some third, like,
well, you know why he can't do it? Because they're what they're allowed to sell the milk for is set, and what he could sell for in that market would be different.
Exactly. Like, and that's it. Like, and these are the things that like you see, but like we don't see. And like,
I guarantee you, millions of Americans would be out drinking that milk if you didn't go to every damn store and see limit 2 per customer. Watching those milk prices fall, everyone be really into it for a couple months.
Yeah.
You remember back when the COVID happened, we were all just going crazy on milk. Let the let
everybody drinking White Russians. Yeah.
I like your idea.
On milk and vodka.
I like where you're going with this. I think this is a good plan.
Yeah, we should.
Make a White Russian right now.
It's I don't know, man. It's mind blowing. It's mind blowing. And when you think, and like, this was, I think, one of the things that was in the back of my head, on my mind, on my conscience, when like all of this shutdown crap started happening, right? Like, I'm not worried about getting the coup. Like, that's not one of my concerns. I am concerned about the economy. I am concerned about like
You sent me an article
all
just
of this.
today about, was it Smithfield,
Smithfield,
whatever?
yeah, yeah.
They're shutting down one of their pork production plants, and they expect shortages of pork products in the summer.
Yep. And it wasn't a great year for corn. There was some floods and stuff like that, and so it wasn't a great year for corn. So that's already there, and then this, and it's all part of it. And the government's going to try to fix that and make things worse, no doubt. And you know what? So if the price of pork goes up, okay, guess what? The price of beef should go down. I mean, like it's but when
Well, the price is going to try and compete, and to do that, you're going to watch things happen.
but I went to the grocery store the other day, and I was still limited to 2 cuts of ground meat, or two cuts of red meat. I think it was basically like I could get all the pork and all the chicken I wanted, but if I wanted beef, I could only get 2 cuts. And I still have the picture of a milk fridge full of milk and a sign that says limit two per customer. Really? Like, is that, and the cost of my milk is still the same that it was, at the beginning of this whole thing. It actually went up a dime
Once
or two.
again, people pretending that prices don't mean anything. The prices don't really mean anything right now because we've not allowed them to mean anything.
Yeah. And we continue to not allow them to mean anything when we flood the market with monopoly money on backs of our children. So it's all messed up. Buy your groceries with gold and crypto.
Folks, go plant a garden in the backyard. You're gonna need it. And learn what shit actually costs. Learn what goes into making it.
I don't even know if you can. Can we even know like what it costs? I mean, from the grain that you feed the cow is paid for, subsidized. It's like all of it. Every single thing is.
Well, with our garden, I told Liz, because all of the seed places were sold out when she went looking for seeds.
I'll mail you some. What do you need?
Talk to Liz. She's the one who, this is her pet project.
All right.
No, so she had a couple packets of something just sitting in a closet somewhere that she found. And other than that, I'm like, Liz, find out what you can do to grow stuff out of the groceries we already have. Yeah. Start planting shit, taking seeds. Let's see what we can make grow. Like that's the kind of thing that's going to get us where we need to get quicker than waiting for other people to, collect stock on stuff that they're out of. Because she was going through seed catalogs, and I'm like, Liz, well, most of those are on back order. She's like, well, not all of them. Like, by the time they probably are, and they're just not telling you because they still want to make the sale because they don't know how this is all going to work out for them. Like, I've talked to people in those positions. They're just saying, oh, it's 2 weeks. They don't know, and it probably ain't coming. They just need to get cash in the door now to handle and weather what's going on. And the quicker, safest thing for us is to just get what we know we can make grow right now, right here. Grab the onions, stick them in the ground, whatever we can do.
There's a lot of stuff you can do like that.
I think she was where she was working on cabbage. I think celery, onions.
I guess you guys are cold enough to grow that stuff right now. Huh?
Well, right now she's got a whole room full of kale.
You ain't getting nothing in the ground, are you? Still frozen. You got snow the other day.
Well, coincidentally, it snowed the other day when it was 72. That was weird. I'm at work, and all of a sudden it's snowing, and I step out of my vehicle, and it was a little balmy. Like, what in the world? Oh, only in Ohio, though.
Some things I don't miss.
So, a couple things coming up. I am in talks with that Patrick Bellamy gentleman that we talked about, a green anarchist, and I believe his big thing he wants to talk about is permaculture, if I remember correctly. So I'm excited to talk to him, and we have a guest slated for next Monday. Let's see here if I can actually get a name. Erica Denise Payne, who's going to talk about zero waste. So that should be a lot of fun. I want to bring in more guests. I want to talk about more topics. I want to try and be a little bit more information heavy. Not just us bantering like dickheads. Look, no, that's why we're bringing in people. We're not going to be providing any information. That's why we got to bring in other people so they can be smarter than us.
Yeah.
And then we can just be assholes.
I'm okay with that.
But anything else we got for today? This episode 41 or 42. What episode are we on?
42.
42?
I
Okay.
think so. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. If you go to the grocery store and they got a cap on your milk or your beef, buy more than the cap and make them tell you to put it back. And then when they tell you to put it back, tell them what they're cocking up. Yeah. I don't know. I got nothing.
All right, folks. Well, I hope you liked today's episode. As always, we're here on Mondays at 10ish on the Facebook. Go to Liberpods or go to freemarketscreenearth.com. Sorry, I've been looking at my Liberpods page all day. Freemarketscreenearth.com. You can send us an email if you want to hear about something in particular. If you like what we're doing, by all means, go on to Apple Podcasts and be like, these guys are amazing. I learned so much about nature and shit. I think I might go on there and just comment that on our podcast specifically.
I need to.
It's something.
It's such a pain in the butt to like figure out. So like once every 6 months, I'll go and I'll just like review a bunch of podcasts that I've like heard about and like, yeah, 5 stars, hooray! So it's about. I think ours is due.
I had to install iTunes on my computer just to do it because it's the easiest way.
I didn't know there was another way to do it. It still
There
kicks
may
my
not
butt.
be. It's doing anything in the app on the phone sucks.
Yeah,
that's why I don't listen to podcasts in there anymore. I like my Overcast.
gotcha.
So, but all right, folks. Well, y'all go out. You have yourself a good day and enjoy the nature while it's here before they say we're not allowed to anymore.
Yeah, they're saying you're not allowed to in some places.
Yeah. Well, is the ocean really nature, Ben? You were definitely hurting all those fishes by being there. You're gonna give them all the couve.
I am. I'm gonna go spit in that water.
All right, folks. Take it easy.
Later.